The film opens in 1965 when Bernard Garrett, a man of color, is summoned to court. The story goes back to 1939, in which Bernard is a young boy shining white people's shoes outside a bank in Texas. While doing his job, he attentively listens to the white folks and takes notes on the banking sector and how it works. While eavesdropping on them after work, Bernard is caught by the bank's security guard who chases him away. Bernard returns home with the notes, seeing which, his father glooms because he knows a black kid won't make it in a world that is dominated by white men. The scenes abruptly forward to 15 years in the future, in which Bernard and his wife have come to Los Angeles, a city of dreams and hopes. Currently, Bernard has no job or house, so he stays at his wife's uncle's house. After settling in, Bernard drives his wife's cousin Tony to his white friend's place. His friend, Matt, is surprised to see Bernard driving a car and asks Tony what he does for a living. That is when we find out that he's a real estate investor. Up next, Bernard visits multiple residential properties that are on sale. Since he needs money to make investments, Bernard's wife takes him to see Joe Morris for a loan. Later, Bernard visits an apartment building in the white community whose owner is a white man named Patrick Barker. Bernard negotiates the buying price of the building using the information he has on the market value and brings it down to $30,000. Bernard also introduces a new niche, educated black folks, to Barker. Bernard believes that fortunate black folks will pay a price to be in the white community, which is how they can generate easy profit. Barker is still skeptical at first, so Bernard decides to visit a bank manager named Reed to issue a loan so he can appear more serious in front of Barker. However, the racist Reed and his secretary weave lies and don't deal with him. He waits for Reed outside the bank and proposes his idea once he gets out, but Reed ignores him and leaves. Disappointed, Bernard returns home to his wife and has thoughts about quitting on his dreams, but he gets a life-changing call from Barker, who is willing to sell him the building and help him get a loan using his reference. With his name involved, Reed gives out a loan to Bernard, which he uses to buy Barker's building. To celebrate his first success, he takes his wife to Joe's jazz club where she socializes with new people. Contrary to her, Bernard sits in a corner with an angry face. Joe spawns from behind him and tries to be on his good side after their previous encounter. This time, he smokes outside with Bernard and tells him that he appreciates people who are intelligent and ambitious like him. The next day, Bernard takes Tony to renovate the apartment building, which he officially owns. While doing some renovations, a racist tenant starts bugging them. She becomes horrified to hear that their building has been sold off to a black man and thinks that their arrival has polluted their community. Bernard remains patient and ignores her. Later that day, he recruits Matt as a laborer, who has no problem working under black people because he's after money. Shortly after, the old woman calls the cops on Bernard for breaking into their building, but Bernard shows them the legal document that confirms that he's the new owner. The cops get convinced and let him carry on his work. A few days later, Bernard moves into the building, which the old woman doesn't appreciate, and she moves out. Contrary to her actions, a black woman arrives to lease one of their apartments. As days pass, Bernard makes enough profit from the building to pay Barker the pending amount and pay off his loans. Seeing him making ends meet, Barker offers him a 50-50 partnership in his next venture. Bernard sees it as an opportunity and seizes it. Soon, the two buy another apartment building, which is a few blocks away from the first building. Their approach turns out to be a success, so they become business partners and hire Matt to look after their tenants' needs. Soon, he buys a huge house for his wife, which makes her happier than ever. However, their happiness doesn't last long because Barker dies and his wife takes over his business. She turns out to be a racist who wishes to annul the partnership with Bernard and liquidate all assets, in which Bernard had a 50% share as well. She tells him to sell his shares at a cheaper price or face a lawsuit. Bernard refuses to sell his shares and prepares himself for a probable lawsuit, fearing that the judge might favor the white widow. He visits Mr. Reed, hoping he'd testify for him, but his secretary refuses to let him see Mr. Reed. He reads a board and finds out that the building has 4 bank branches in it. He silently plans on buying the entire building to teach the racist bankers a lesson. Despite hating on Joe, he turns to him for a loan big enough to buy the bank building. Joe finds him audacious, as no black man has ever dared to own such a prominent estate in America. But Bernard cleverly delivers his pitch and guarantees that buying the bank building will elevate their status in the white community. Joe always knew Bernard was going to score high, so he praises him and agrees to work with him. Joe points out the fact that despite them having money, the white owners won't sell them the building. That is when Bernard uses his brain and comes up with an idea to make Matt their frontman since he's a white boy. Matt immediately agrees to play the role, as it will bring him money too. Before presenting him to the white folks, they groom him to give off a rich white man vibe because he looks broke in reality. Hence, Joe teaches him how to play golf, while Bernard teaches him a thing or two about real estate. Matt turns out to be a fast learner who doesn't disappoint them. They also bond with each other during the process and become good friends. Soon comes the day Joe lays out his plan to meet the bank building owner. The owner is a rich man who uses an entire ballroom as his office. Joe knows he doesn't see investors, so he does some digging and finds out he's an exclusive member of a country club. He prepares Matt to join the club and pretend to bump into the owner, which will be their first move of deceit. The first day, Matt arrives at the golf club for the sake of appearances only. He also bumps into the owner and makes it look like a coincidence. However, he becomes intimidated and thinks he won't be able to strike the deal because he's not good with numbers. Bernard further teaches him how to determine the value of an estate based on the land size and its assets. He had counted the offices and all the other assets, upon which he estimated the value and price of the building. Finally, Matt has lunch with the building owner, during which the owner lays out all the expenses and market value of his building. Matt secretly gets nervous, but Bernard's teachings come in handy, and he impresses the owner. He gets impressed with Matt's offer and sells his building to him, not knowing the real deal. When Bernard starts showing up as the real owner along with Matt, Mr. Reed and his racist secretary go into a state of shock. As time passes, Bernard invests in multiple properties and keeps growing richer. Matt also makes an honest living out of Bernard's business and marries a waitress named Susie, with whom he is in love. One day, Bernard visits his father with his wife and son. His father becomes proud of him for achieving his goals and making it this far, but he still stresses over the fact that their town is still very much discriminating towards black folks and is hindering them from becoming successful like Bernard. The next day, Bernard takes his son to the shoe shine stand where he used to shine white people's shoes. He gives his father's words a thought and decides to do business in Texas and help the black community progress. When he takes this proposal to Joe, Joe renders it useless because he doesn't see the profit in that. When Bernard shares his true intentions, Joe agrees to invest in the bank, outside which Bernard used to shine shoes. Their frontman Matt does the dealing with the building owners and helps Bernard buy the building. Up next, they also buy the bank in the building and give out easy loans to the black folks so they can buy more property in Texas and rise as equals to the white folks. One of the owners notes their pattern and figures that they're only favoring the black. Hence, he confronts them about this and lets them know that if the federal bank finds out about their biased favoring, they can go to jail. Now left perplexed, Matt comes up with an idea of buying another bank and transferring all the loan cases there. He plans to run that bank to avoid getting suspected. They follow this plan and buy another bank. Matt also tricks his lawyer into signing all the loan documents. Despite things flowing smoothly, tension rises when Matt finds out the federal bank is coming to inspect his bank. Bernard is also alerted of the situation, so he dresses up as a janitor and enters Matt's bank. Joe also arrives there as a customer and sits in the waiting lounge. Bernard eavesdrops on Matt's interview with the federal auditor. He finds out that the feds have picked up on their loan issue and are now planning to seize his banking license. He keeps meeting Bernard and Joe in the bathroom, who tell him what to do next. When the auditor decides to declare their bank in default, Matt returns to the bathroom. Joe and Bernard figure that Matt's lawyer has done some serious damage with his mistakes, which the feds are now using against them. They scold Matt for going with this idea even when he wasn't fully ready. Later, Bernard returns home to his wife. When they unite later, Matt decides to sue the lawyer, but Joe reminds him that he willingly signed the documents that clearly stated what kind of bank Matt was buying. After a thorough debate, Joe and Bernard leave Matt alone. The next day, Joe gets a call from his source, worrying about Matt's bank. Joe assures him that they are no longer financially backing up Matt's bank, but the source reveals that the mainland bank in Texas is willing to back him up. Joe involves Bernard, and together, they head to Matt's bank. They make him aware that if he keeps up with this facade, he will sink both their banks simultaneously. While pressuring him to shut down their bank, Bernard asks him to fetch the accounting books. Unfortunately, the FBI raids their bank and arrests them for the biased loans and their transference to another bank to avoid suspicion. Bernard, Joe, and Matt are released on bail so they can defend themselves in court. Their lawyer clearly states that the judge will be favoring the white folks and not them, which makes things harder for Bernard. While Bernard tries to look for ways to win the case, Matt is called into the judge's office, where he's offered to testify against Bernard and Joe to clear his name. He's always been gullible, so he takes the judge's offer. Bernard is also given the same offer, but he refuses. When their court hearing day arrives, Bernard speaks of the difficulties of the black community and justifies how his work helped the black community. Matt gives false testimony, using which the judge sentences Bernard and Joe to jail. When Bernard and Joe complete their jail time and are released, they share with Bernard's wife that Matt was on their side all along, who took their advice via a phone call and liquidated their assets and estate before investing their money elsewhere. Hence, they're still rich. As they plan their next move, the film ends. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome recaps.